Hello, and welcome to a cozy, sleepy Pokemon video. In tonight's video, we will explore interesting details about the Pokemon of the Sinnoh region, the fourth generation that introduced cross-generation evolutions, mythological legendaries, and a massive roster of creatures tied to the lakes, mountains, and forests of a region inspired by northern Japan. From the iconic starter trio to the legendary dragons that govern time and space, Sinnoh has remained one of the most beloved generations in Pokemon history, filled with competitive powerhouses and unforgettable designs. Before we begin exploring these Pokemon, take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us which Pokemon has always been your favorite, the one that feels like it belongs to your journey, and let us know what time it is, where you are in the world right now. Whether it's late at night as you're winding down or early morning as your day takes shape, we'd love to know you're here with us. Torterra has remained one of the most iconic grass-type starters since Generation 4. Not just because of its powerful presence in battle, but because its design draws from ancient mythology about world-bearing creatures, particularly the concept of a turtle carrying entire ecosystems on its shell. The Pokédex describes Torterra as having small Pokémon making their nests in the tree, growing on its back, reinforcing this living habitat concept that Game Freak wove throughout its design philosophy. And this biological detail separates Torterra from other bulky grass types by positioning it as a mobile environment, rather than just a large creature. What makes Torterra especially fascinating from a competitive standpoint is its grass-ground typing, a combination that gives it a quadruple weakness to Ice-type moves, but also grants it access to Earthquake, one of the most powerful and reliable physical moves in the entire game, allowing Torterra to hit Steel, Fire, Poison, and Rock types with devastating force. Pairing Earthquake with Woodhammer, Torterra's signature Grass-type physical move with 120 base power, created a straightforward but effective attacking strategy that made it viable in Generation 4's competitive scene despite its low speed stat of 56. Grottle, Torterra's middle evolution, represents one of those awkward transitional designs where the small turtle has grown larger and heavier, but hasn't yet developed the tree or the continent-bearing aesthetic, leaving it visually caught between stages, a design choice that reinforces the evolutionary journey, even if Grottle itself doesn't get much attention compared to Turtwig's cuteness and Torterra's imposing presence. Infernape stands out as one of the most competitively dominant starter Pokemon ever released, a firefighting type whose design draws heavily from Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Chinese mythology known for his agility, combat prowess, and rebellious nature, qualities that translate directly into Infernape's stat, distribution, and move pool. With a base speed stat of 108, Infernape sits comfortably above most threats in Generation 4's OU tier, outspeeding common walls and sweepers alike, and its mixed attacking stats, 104 in attack and 104 in special attack, allow it to run versatile sets that can pivot between physical moves like Close Combat and Flare Blitz, or special moves like Fire Blast and Grass Knot, depending on the opponent's defensive weaknesses. This flexibility made Infernape a staple on competitive teams throughout Generation 4 and beyond, functioning as a revenge killer, a late-game sweeper, or even a lead Pokemon with Stealth Rock access, roles that few other fire types could perform with the same consistency. The Chimchar line follows the same evolutionary progression as many fire starters, beginning as a pure fire type in Chimchar and Monferno, before gaining the fighting type upon evolution into Infernape. And Monferno holds the unfortunate distinction of being the third fire-fighting middle evolution in a row after Combusken in Generation 3, and following the pattern established by Torchic's line, a repetition that became a source of criticism from fans, even though Infernape's design and competitive viability helped it avoid the stigma that later fire-fighting starters would face. Infernape's Blaze ability, which boosts fire-type moves when HP drops below 1/3, synergizes with its frail defenses, turning Desperation into offensive power and allowing it to sweep weakened teams with boosted fire attacks in the closing moments of battles. Empoleon holds the distinction of being the only Water Steel starter Pokemon ever release across all 9 generations, a typing that grants it incredible defensive resistances, taking neutral or reduced damage from 10 of the 18 types, and providing it with a unique niche as a bulky special attacker that can pivot into threats and retaliate with powerful water and ice type coverage moves. The design inspiration comes from emperor penguins, the largest and most regal of all penguin species, and Game Freak translated this into Empoleon's upright posture, crown-like head crest, and trident-shaped flippers that resemble royal regalia, giving it a commanding presence that matches its competitive role as a defensive backbone or special sweeper depending on the set. Piplup, the unevolved starter, achieved massive popularity through its appearances in the Pokemon anime, particularly as Dawn's partner Pokemon throughout the Diamond and Pearl series, where its stubborn personality and refusal to evolve, despite multiple opportunities, endeared it to audiences and turned it into a merchandising icon that rivaled even Pikachu's popularity during Generation 4's peak. Dawn's Piplup became one of the few starter Pokemon in the anime to remain unevolved for an entire regional arc, a decision that reinforced its identity as a mascot character rather than just another starter going through the typical evolutionary progression. And this prominence carried over into merchandise, plushies, promotional materials, and even the Pokemon Cafe Mix mobile game, where Piplup serves as a central character. Primplup, the middle evolution, exhibits a noticeably proud and sometimes haughty personality, reflected in its animations and Pokédex entries, standing more upright than Piplup, and carrying itself with a dignified air that bridges the gap between the cute starter and the regal final evolution. The shiny forms for all 3 Sinnoh starter lines follow the typical subtle color palette shifts that Generation 4 favored, with shiny Torterra gaining a lighter, more olive-toned green on its shell and body, shiny Infernape shifting to a warmer golden-orange flame with brownish fur, and shiny Empoleon adopting a deeper navy blue body, with more vibrant gold accents on its crown and flippers. Changes that maintain the original design philosophy while offering collectors distinct visual variations. Staraptor stands as one of the most powerful early root bird Pokemon ever introduced, breaking the traditional mold of weak, normal flying types that players encounter in the opening hours of their journey, and it achieves this through a base attack stat of 120, a number that rivals and often exceeds fully evolved pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and places it in the same offensive tier as creatures like Heracross and Gyarados. This raw physical power, combined with access to close combat, through Level Up and Brave Bird as its flying-type stab move, allowed Staraptor to remain competitively viable throughout Generation 4 and beyond, functioning as a fast physical wall breaker that could punch holes in defensive teams before they had time to set up, a role that no previous regional bird had fulfilled with such consistency. Bidoof, on the other hand, occupies the opposite end of the viability spectrum, having become one of the most recognizable meme Pokemon in the entire franchise, due to its role as the quintessential HM slave, a creature players would catch early and teach Rock Smash, Cut, and Strength to preserve moveset slots on their main team members, and this utilitarian function, combined with Bidoof's dopey expression and simple design, made it an icon of comedy within the Pokemon community despite its lack of competitive merit. Bibarel, Bidoof's evolution, gained some unexpected attention in later generations, when players discovered its hidden ability, Simple, which doubles the effects of stat changes, and turns Bibarel into a potentially threatening sweeper if it can set up with moves like Curse or Swords Dance, transforming a forgettable normal G water type into something capable of overwhelming unprepared opponents through exponential stat multiplication. Kricketune, the bug-type cricket evolution found in Sinnoh's early forests, became famous not for its battle prowess, but for its distinctive cry, a sound that players phonetically transcribed as delelelele whoop, and turned into an internet phenomenon, a rare case where a Pokemon's audio design overshadowed every other aspect of its identity, and created lasting cultural impact despite Kricketune's mediocre stats and limited competitive usage. Luxray has remained one of Generation 4's most visually striking Pokemon, a pure electric-type predator whose design incorporates elements of lions, lynxes, and X-ray technology, with the Pokédex specifically describing its ability to see through solid objects by detecting electrical signals and using this vision to locate prey hidden behind walls or underground. Despite its dark coloration, black and blue color scheme, and intimidating red and yellow eyes that suggest a dark typing, Luxray remains purely electric across all generations, a decision that disappointed many players who expected it to gain a secondary type upon evolution, and gave rise to persistent fan requests for a regional variant or mega evolution that would finally grant it the electric dark typing its appearance implies. What makes Luxray especially interesting from a design perspective is how Game Freak balanced its predatory aesthetic with a loyal, protective nature in the anime and Pokédex entries, positioning it as a Pokémon that forms strong bonds with trainers while maintaining its fierce hunting instincts. A duality that appears in its animations, where it displays both aggressive battle stances and calm, observant postures. The shiny form of Luxray shifts from blue and black to a striking golden yellow with black accents, creating one of the most visually distinct, shiny variations in Generation 4, and making shiny Luxray highly sought after by collectors who appreciate the transformation from cool colors to warm, metallic tones. Pachirisu, the electric squirrel Pokemon that most players dismissed as a Pikachu clone with inferior stats and limited move pool, shocked the competitive community when Sejun Park used one to win the 2014 Pokemon Video Game World Championships. Employing Pachirisu's access to Follow Me, a move that redirects all single target attacks to the user, combined with its decent bulk and the ability to support its teammates by absorbing attacks meant for more fragile sweepers like Garchomp and Mega Gyarados. This victory remains one of the most iconic moments in competitive Pokemon history, proving that creativity and understanding of game mechanics can elevate even statistically mediocre Pokemon to championship-winning status and permanently changing how players evaluate early route encounters that might otherwise be boxed and forgotten. Buizel and Floatzel carry a distinctly aquatic rescue theme in their designs, with both Pokemon sporting inflatable yellow flotation sacks around their necks and bodies that reference lifeguard equipment, allowing them to assist drowning Pokemon and people according to Pokédex entries, while also functioning as biological adaptations that help them maintain buoyancy and speed in water. Shellos and Gastrodon introduced one of Generation 4's most interesting regional variation concepts through their East Sea and West Sea forms, with the pink Shellos and Gastrodon appearing on Sinnoh's eastern coastline and the blue variants found on the western shores, a division that reflects real-world geographical isolation, causing different color morphs in marine species, and added a layer of biological authenticity to the Pokemon world, even before regional variants became an official mechanic in Generation 7. Gastrodon found significant success in competitive doubles formats thanks to its Storm Drain ability, which not only grants it immunity to water-type moves, but also raises its special attack by 1 stage whenever it's targeted by a water move, turning what would be neutral damage into a free boost and making Gastrodon an ideal partner for water-weak Pokemon like Landorus Therian and Incineroar in later generation formats, where water-type spread moves like Muddy Water and Surf see frequent use. Cherrim presents one of the most unique transformation mechanics introduced in Generation 4, shifting from its closed overcast form to its vibrant sunshine form whenever harsh sunlight is active on the field, a change that not only alters its appearance from a wilted flower to a blooming blossom, but also triggers its Flower Gift ability, which boosts the attack and special defense of Cherrim and its allies by 50%, making it a niche but potent support option on Sun teams despite its mediocre base stats. Roserade stands as one of Generation 4's most successful cross-generation evolutions, taking Roselia from a forgettable mid-tier grass poison type and transforming it into a legitimate offensive threat with 125 base, special attack and 90 base speed, allowing it to function as a special sweeper or revenge killer, with access to Sleep Powder for disruption and powerful grass and poison stab moves like Leaf Storm and Sludge Bomb. Budew, the baby pre-evolution introduced alongside Roserade, requires high friendship and evolution during daytime hours to evolve into Roselia, a condition that reflects its flower-based design and ties evolutionary progression to the player's bond with the Pokemon, rather than just level grinding. A thematic choice that adds emotional weight to the evolution process. Staravia, the middle evolution of the Starly line, holds the unusual distinction of being the only middle-stage regional bird to receive significant screen time in the Pokemon anime, appearing as Ash's Staravia for an extended period before eventually evolving into a Staraptor during the Diamond and Pearl series. A choice that gave the often overlooked second evolution more personality and development, than any of its counterparts in previous or subsequent generations. Generation 4 introduced 29 cross-generation evolutions, the highest number of any generation in Pokemon history, taking forgotten or underwhelming Pokemon from previous generations and granting them new evolutionary stages that transform them into competitive threats, beloved designs, or both simultaneously. A philosophy that showed Game Freak's willingness to revisit older creatures and give them second chances rather than allowing them to fade into obscurity as the roster expanded. Waviel represents one of the most successful of these revivals, evolving from Sneasel when leveled up at night while holding a Razor Claw, an item that reflects its sharp, blade-like claws and predatory nature. And this evolution transforms Sneasel from a fragile dark or ice type, with interesting but underutilized stats, into one of Generation 4's premier offensive threats with 120 base attack and 125 base speed. What makes Weavile especially valuable from a competitive standpoint is its role as a pursuit trapper, a Pokemon capable of using the move Pursuit to deal double damage to opponents attempting to switch out, allowing it to eliminate weakened threats or lock opponents into unfavorable matchups by threatening massive Dark-type damage, regardless of whether they stay in or flee. A niche that made Weavile a staple on offensive teams throughout Generation 4 and into subsequent competitive formats, where its combination of speed, power, and trapping utility created pressure that few other Pokemon could replicate. Magnezone gained one of the most dramatic stat increases of any cross-generation evolution, jumping from Magneton's respectable but not exceptional 120 base special attack to an impressive 130, a boost that places it among the most powerful special attackers in the game and allows it to fire off devastatingly strong stab thunderbolts and flash cannons that threaten even resistant targets with significant damage. The design shift from Magneton to Magnezone embraces a UFO aesthetic, transforming 3 connected Magnemite units into a single large flying saucer with a singular eye and streamlined body. And this evolution only occurs when Magneton levels up in areas with strong magnetic fields, specifically Mount Coronet in the Sinnoh region, a location-based evolution requirement that ties the Pokemon's transformation to the geography of the game world and adds environmental storytelling to the mechanical process. Togekiss became one of Generation 4's most iconic additions to the Togepi line, evolving from Togetic when exposed to a shiny stone, and initially debuting as a normal flying type, before being retroactively changed to Fairy flying when the Fairy type was introduced in Generation 6, a retcon that made perfect sense, given Togekiss's angelic design, gentle nature, and association with joy and peace according to its Pokédex entries. The competitive scene quickly identified Togekiss as a master of the paraflinch strategy, a technique that combines serene grace, an ability that doubles the chance of secondary effects occurring, with moves like Air Slash and Thunder Wave to create a devastating loop where opponents become paralyzed, and then continuously flinch from Air Slash's boosted 60% flinch rate, effectively preventing them from moving at all, while Togekiss slowly whittles down their health in one of the most frustrating but effective stall tactics in competitive play. Gliscor stands as perhaps the most defensively oriented of Generation 4's cross-generation evolutions, taking Gligar's unique ground, flying typing, and solid defensive stats, and elevating them with access to Poison Heal, a hidden ability that restores 1/8 of Gliscor's maximum HP at the end of each turn when poisoned, instead of taking damage, effectively granting it passive recovery that outpaces most attacks when combined with its strong defense stat of 125, and allows it to wall physical attackers indefinitely while threatening them with Earthquake, or setting up hazards with Stealth Rock. Mamoswine represents one of the most satisfying evolutionary revivals in the franchise, requiring Piloswine to know ancient power upon leveling up to evolve, a thematic requirement that references prehistoric mammoths and connects Mamoswine's ice-ground typing to ancient creatures preserved in permafrost. And this evolution transforms a forgettable middle-stage Pokemon into a powerful physical attacker with 130 base attack and access to priority Ice Shard, making it one of the most reliable revenge killers and late-game cleaners in competitive formats, where faster threats like dragon types and flying types dominate the metagame. Yanmega, evolving from Yanma when it knows ancient power upon leveling up, showcases another prehistoric revival theme with its dragonfly design inspired by ancient Meganeura insects that lived during the Carboniferous period. And while its stat distribution leans toward offense with 116 base special attack and 95 base speed, what truly defines Yanmega in competitive play is its ability to access Speed Boost, an ability that raises speed by 1 stage at the end of each turn, and allows Yanmega to outpace threats that would normally revenge kill it. Combined with Tinted Lens, an alternative ability that doubles the damage of not very effective moves and allows Yanmega to hit resistant targets like Steel and Rock types for meaningful damage with Bug Buzz despite the type disadvantage. Gallade introduced the concept of gender-specific branching evolutions to the Pokemon series in a meaningful way, requiring a male Kirlia to be exposed to a Dawnstone to evolve instead of following Gardevoir's level-based evolution path, a requirement that creates 2 distinct final stages for the Ralts line based entirely on gender, and gives players meaningful choice in how they develop their Psychic-type starter from Hoenn's roots. This evolution transforms the graceful, specially oriented Gardevoir line into a physical, fighting, psychic warrior with bladed arms and a knightly aesthetic, granting it access to close combat and a base attack stat of 125 that makes it a legitimate physical threat capable of breaking through specially defensive walls that would easily handle Gardevoir's attacks. And this divergence shows Game Freak's willingness to create dramatically different gameplay niches from the same evolutionary family. Dusknoir, evolving from Dusclops when traded while holding a Reaper Cloth, represents one of the few cases where a cross-generation evolution arguably made a Pokemon less competitively viable, as Dusclops with Eviolite in later generations often performs better defensively than Dusknoir, thanks to the item's boost to defense and special defense, though Dusknoir's design as a one-eyed ghost with a cyclopean appearance and antenna that receives transmissions from the spirit world remains visually striking and thematically rich even if its competitive niche remains unclear. Froslas offers female Snorunt, an alternative evolutionary path to Glalie, through use of a Dawnstone, creating a graceful ice ghost type with a kimono-wearing Yuki-onna design based on Japanese folklore about spirits of women who died in snowstorms. And this typing grants Froslas a unique niche as one of the fastest users of spikes in competitive play with 110 base speed, allowing it to set up entry hazards before opponents can react, and supporting its teammates by gradually wearing down switching opponents throughout the match. Leafeon and Glaceon represent location-based evolutions for Eevee that debuted in Generation 4, requiring players to level up Eevee near a moss rock found in Eterna Forest for Leafeon, or an ice rock found on Route 217 for Glaceon. Environmental triggers that tie these evolutions to specific landmarks in the Sinnoh region, and add geographical significance to what would otherwise be simple level-based progressions. Though later generations simplified these requirements by introducing leaf stones and ice stones that allow evolution anywhere. The shiny form of Gliscor shifts from purple and red coloring to a bright cyan and blue palette, creating one of the most visually distinct shiny variations among cross-generation evolutions and making shiny Gliscor highly sought after by collectors who appreciate the dramatic transformation from warm to cool tones that completely changes the Pokemon's visual identity while maintaining its scorpion bat hybrid design philosophy. Electivire and Magmortar represent Generation 4's most prominent evolution pair, serving as counterparts that mirror each other in design philosophy, evolution method, and competitive role, both requiring their pre-evolutions, Electabuzz and Magmar, to be traded while holding specific items, the Electrizer and Magmarizer respectively, items that reflect each Pokemon's elemental specialization, and transform them from mid-tier special attackers into physically imposing powerhouses with distinct aesthetic identities. Electivire's design emphasizes raw electrical power with thick cables extending from its back that resemble high-voltage transmission lines, muscular arms capable of delivering devastating physical attacks, and a base attack stat of 123 that allows it to function as a mixed attacker capable of using both physical moves like Thunder Punch and special moves like Thunderbolt depending on the opponent's defensive weaknesses. What makes Electivire especially interesting from a competitive standpoint is its motor drive ability, which grants it immunity to electric-type moves and raises its speed stat by 1 stage whenever it's hit by an electric attack, effectively turning what would be neutral or super effective damage into a free speed boost that allows Electivire to outpace threats and sweep through teams, a mechanic that made it valuable on teams that could redirect electric attacks toward it through strategic switching or partner support. Magmortar follows a similar design philosophy but leans more heavily into special attacks, featuring cannon-like arms that fire intense flames and a base special attack stat of 125 that makes it one of the most powerful fire-type special attackers introduced in Generation 4, capable of threatening steel, grass, ice, and bug types with Flamethrower, Fire Blast, or its coverage options like Thunderbolt and Focus Blast. Rhyperior takes Raiden's already impressive physical bulk and offensive power and elevates them to even greater heights, requiring a trade while holding a protector item to evolve and gaining access to the solid rock ability, which reduces the damage taken from super effective moves by 25% and allows Rhyperior to survive attacks that would normally eliminate it in a single hit, particularly water and grass type moves that exploit its quadruple weaknesses and would otherwise make it unviable in competitive play. This defensive boost, combined with Rhyperior's massive base defense stat of 130 and attack stat of 140, creates a Pokemon that can tank physical hits while retaliating with Earthquake, Stone Edge, or Megahorn, making it a potent physical wall breaker capable of punching through defensive cores that rely on physically bulky Pokemon to check threats, though its abysmal speed stat of 40 leaves it vulnerable to faster special attackers that can exploit its lower special defense before it has a chance to move. Porygon Z represents one of the most conceptually interesting evolutions in Generation 4, taking the artificial duck-like Porygon 2 and intentionally corrupting it through a dubious upgrade process that results in a glitchy, erratic version with sharp angles, disjointed movements, and an unstable appearance that suggests something went wrong during the evolution process. A design choice that Game Freak reinforced through Pokédex entries describing Porygon Z as exhibiting odd behavior and moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. This thematic corruption translates into incredible offensive power, with Porygon Z possessing a base special attack stat of 135 and access to adaptability, an ability that increases the stab damage bonus from 50% to 100%, effectively doubling the power of same-type attacks and allowing Porygon Z to fire off tri-attacks and hyper beams that deal absurd amounts of damage to anything that doesn't resist them, making it one of the most dangerous special wall breakers in Generation 4's competitive scene when properly supported. Probopass evolves from Nosepass through the same location-based requirement as Magnezone, needing to level up within Montcoronet's magnetic field, a requirement that ties its evolution to the mountain's geological properties and suggests that certain Pokemon require specific environmental conditions to trigger transformations that wouldn't occur naturally in other regions. Tangrowth revives Tangela from competitive obscurity by granting it a massive base defense stat of 125 and access to Regenerator as its hidden ability, an ability that restores 33% of Tangrowth's maximum HP whenever it switches out of battle, effectively granting it passive recovery that allows it to pivot in and out of battle repeatedly throughout a match while maintaining healthy HP totals and absorbing attacks from physical threats that would otherwise threaten its teammates. This combination of bulk, recovery, and access to sleep powder for disruption made Tangrowth a staple on defensive and balanced teams in later generations, functioning as a physical wall that could check ground, water, and fighting-type threats while providing momentum through knockoff or U-turn, roles that Tangela could never fill due to its significantly lower stats and lack of recovery options. Lickilicky evolves from Lickitung in one of Generation 4's more unusual evolution requirements, needing Lickitung to know the move rollout upon leveling up, a thematic connection that references Lickitung's tongue-based attacks and rolling capabilities, while adding a layer of complexity to the evolution process that requires players to either level up Lickitung until it naturally learns rollout, or teach it the move through TM, a requirement that makes Lickilicky less accessible than evolutions that simply require stones or trading, but adds personality to the evolution by connecting it to a specific move in Lickitung's repertoire. Ambipom transforms Ipom from a cute but forgettable normal-type monkey into a faster, more offensively capable version with dual tails that it uses as hands, evolving when Apom learns double hit and levels up, and while its stats remain relatively modest with 100 base attack and 115 base speed, what makes Ambipom competitively relevant is its access to Technician, an ability that boosts the power of moves with 60 base power or less by 50%. turning weak attacks like Fake Out, U-Turn, and Double Hit into respectable damage sources that allow Ambipom to function as a support attacker that disrupts opponents while maintaining offensive pressure. Mismagius evolves from Misdreavus when exposed to a Dusk Stone, transforming the floating ghost into a more mature, witch-like design, with a flowing purple robe, pointed hat, and mystical appearance that references classical depictions of sorceresses and magical practitioners. And this evolution grants Mismagius a significantly higher base special attack stat of 105, along with access to Levitate, making it immune to ground-type moves and allowing it to function as a fast special attacker with access to Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, and support moves like Nasty Plot that boost its already strong special offense to sweeping levels. Honchkrow takes Murkrow's crow design and transforms it into a larger, more imposing bird, with a fedora-like crest and a coat-like wing arrangement that evokes imagery of 1920s gangsters and mafia bosses, evolving when Murkrow is exposed to a Dust Stone and gaining significantly improved stats with 125 base attack that allows it to function as a powerful physical attacker with access to Brave Bird, Sucker Punch, and superpower for coverage against steel and rock types that resist its stab moves. The shiny form of Honchkrow shifts from black and red to a striking combination of pink and purple plumage, creating one of the most visually distinct shiny variations among Dark-type Pokemon, and giving it an almost regal appearance that contrasts sharply with its mafioso inspiration while maintaining the boss-like aesthetic that defines its design philosophy. The physical and special split introduced in Generation 4 fundamentally changed how these cross-generation evolutions functioned in battle, as prior to this change, all Dark-type moves were special, and all Fighting-type moves were physical regardless of the individual move. But Generation 4 made each move individually, physical or special, based on its nature, allowing Pokemon like Honchkrow, Weavile, and Electivire to use their high attack stats with Dark, Ice, and Electric type moves respectively, opening up new strategic possibilities that made many of these evolutions competitively viable for the first time in the franchise's history. Garchomp stands as the only non-legendary pseudo-legendary Pokemon introduced in Generation 4, a Dragon Ground type that dominated competitive play so thoroughly during its debut generation that discussions about banning it from standard play occurred regularly among the community. And this dominance stems from its nearly perfect combination of offensive stats, speed, typing, and move pool that allowed it to function as a sweeper, wall breaker, revenge killer, or setup threat, depending on the set and situation. What makes Garchomp especially dangerous is its base speed stat of 108, a number that sits just above the crowded 100 speed tier, where many offensive threats reside, allowing it to outspeed Pokemon like Salamence, Jirachi, and Zapdos, while threatening them with powerful Stab Earthquake and Outrage attacks backed by 130 base attack. And this speed advantage transforms Garchomp from merely strong into overwhelmingly oppressive, because it can revenge kill weakened threats while also serving as a late-game cleaner that sweeps through teams once its checks have been eliminated. The Dragon Ground typing provides Garchomp with excellent offensive coverage and only two weaknesses, Ice and Dragon, though the Ice weakness is quadruple and makes it vulnerable to priority Ice Shard from Pokemon like Mamoswine or Weavile. But this single exploitable weakness proved insufficient to keep Garchomp in check during Generation 4's competitive scene, where its ability to switch into electric attacks, threaten fire and steel types with Earthquake, and muscle through neutral targets with sheer power made it nearly mandatory on offensive teams. Cynthia's Garchomp became one of the most infamous boss battles in Pokemon history, appearing as the final Pokemon on the Sinnoh Champions team with higher than normal levels, perfect IVs, and a moveset designed to sweep unprepared players, and countless trainers experience the frustration of watching their teams crumble to Swords Dance boosted Earthquakes and Dragon Rushes from a Garchomp that seemed unstoppable, without specific Ice-type coverage or priority moves to revenge, kill it before it could move. Mega Garchomp, introduced in Generation 6, created controversy within the competitive community by actually making Garchomp worse in certain situations, as the Mega Evolution boosted its attack and bulk but lowered its speed from 108 to 92, dropping it below the critical 100 speed tier and allowing threats like Landorus Therian, Latios, and Salamence to outspeed and revenge kill it with their stab moves, a trade-off that many players found unacceptable, given that Garchomp's speed was one of its most valuable assets in the first place. Gible and Gabite, the pre-evolutions in Garchomp's line, maintain the Dragon Ground typing throughout all three stages, with Gible appearing as a small landshark that lives in caves and volcanic areas according to Pokédex entries, and Gabite serving as the intermediate stage with a more aggressive appearance and the ability to extend blades from its forearms for attacking and digging through rock. Evolutionary stages that build toward Garchomp's jet fighter-inspired design with its streamlined body and blade-like fins. From a moveset perspective, Garchomp gained access to an incredibly diverse range of coverage options, including Fire Fang for steel types, Stone Edge for flying types that resist Earthquake, and Crunch for psychic and ghost types, allowing it to customize its coverage based on team needs, and eliminating the predictability that plagues many offensive Pokemon locked into specific 4-move sets. And this versatility made Garchomp even more difficult to counter, because players couldn't reliably predict which coverage move it would carry. The shiny form of Garchomp represents one of the most subtle color changes in the entire franchise, shifting from dark blue and red to a slightly lighter, more purple-tinted blue that remains barely distinguishable from the original coloring, a choice that disappointed shiny hunters who expected more dramatic visual differences and led to jokes within the community about Garchomp's shiny being the least impressive pseudo-legendary shiny variant. Lucario's design centers around its ability to sense and manipulate aura, an invisible energy that surrounds all living things according to Pokédex entries. And this power allows Lucario to read emotions, predict movements, and even communicate telepathically in certain depictions, abilities that connect it to martial arts philosophy and spiritual concepts about life energy that appear throughout various cultures. The steel fighting typing, introduced with Lucario, creates a unique combination that grants it resistances to common attacking types like rock, bug, normal, ice, psychic, and dragon, while giving it powerful stab options in close combat and flash cannon that provide near-perfect neutral coverage across most of the type chart, making Lucario a versatile offensive threat that could fit on both physical and special attacking teams depending on its moveset and role. Lucario achieved mainstream recognition beyond the Pokemon games through its starring role in the movie Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, where it served as a central character with a tragic backstory, the ability to speak through aura, and emotional depth that elevated it above typical Pokemon movie partners. And this prominent appearance cemented Lucario's status as one of Generation 4's flagship Pokemon, alongside the starter trio and legendaries. Riolu, Lucario's baby pre-evolution, requires high friendship and evolution during daytime hours to transform into Lucario, a requirement that reflects the bond between Pokemon and trainer that Lucario's aura abilities emphasize thematically. And this friendship-based evolution adds emotional weight to obtaining Lucario by requiring players to invest time in building their relationship with Riolu, rather than simply grinding levels. Lucario's massive popularity led to its inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Brawl as a playable fighter, one of the few Pokemon to receive this honor outside of Pikachu, Jigglypuff, and the occasional starter. And its presence in Smash Bros. Introduced Lucario to audiences who had never played Pokemon games, while reinforcing its status as a marketing icon for Generation 4 and establishing it as one of the most recognizable Pokemon created after the original 151. Spiritomb occupies a unique position in Pokemon history as one of only 2 Pokemon that had no type weaknesses whatsoever in Generation 4, sharing this distinction with Sableye, thanks to the Dark Ghost, typing that resisted or was immune to every type in the game before the introduction of Fairy-type moves in Generation 6. And this perfect defensive typing, combined with respectable bulk, made Spiritomb a reliable check to many offensive threats that couldn't touch it with their stab moves. According to Pokédex entries and the lore surrounding Spiritomb's capture, it consists of 108 malicious spirits bound together and sealed inside an odd keystone, a number that references the 108 earthly temptations in Buddhist tradition and connects Spiritombs, designed to spiritual concepts about evil thoughts and desires that must be contained to prevent harm. And this backstory adds mythological weight to what could have been a simple ghost-type design. The method for encountering Spiritomb in Diamond and Pearl required players to interact with 32 different people in the underground multiplayer area, then place an odd keystone in a specific stone tower on Route 209, a capture requirement so convoluted and multiplayer dependent that many players never obtained Spiritomb during their initial playthroughs, and had to look up guides or connect with friends specifically to fulfill these conditions, making Spiritomb one of the rarest non-legendary Pokemon in Sinnoh, despite being available before the Elite Four. The Dark Ghost typing grants Spiritomb immunities to normal, fighting, and psychic-type moves, while providing offensive stab options that hit most of the metagame for neutral damage, and when combined with its base 108 HP and even defensive distribution of 108 in both defense and special defense, Spiritomb functions as a bulky pivot that can switch into attacks, disrupt opponents with Will-O-Wisp or Hypnosis, and wear down teams through Sucker Punch and Shadow Ball while maintaining pressure through its lack of common weaknesses. The shiny form of Spiritomb transforms its purple and green color scheme into a striking teal and cyan palette, creating one of the most visually appealing shiny variations in Generation 4, and making shiny Spiritomb highly sought after, despite the already difficult process of obtaining a regular Spiritomb, effectively doubling the effort required for players who wanted both the rare encounter and the alternate colouring. Rotom introduced one of Generation 4's most innovative mechanical concepts through its 5 appliance forms, originally accessible only in Platinum version when players interacted with specific household appliances in a secret room. And these forms transform Rotom from a pure electric charge ghost type into specialized variants that each gain a secondary typing based on the appliance possessed, with Heat Rotom becoming electric fire, Wash Rotom gaining water typing, Frost Rotom becoming part ice, Fan Rotom gaining flying, and Mow Rotom adding grass to its electric base. Each form grants Rotom access to a signature move tied to its new typing. Moves like Hydro Pump for Wash Rotom, Overheat for Heat Rotom, and Blizzard for Frost Rotom, significantly expanding Rotom's coverage options and allowing it to threaten types that would otherwise wall its standard electric shot ghost stab combination. And this move pool versatility combined with Levitate, providing ground immunity, made every Rotom form competitively viable in different team compositions. Rotom Wash, in particular, became one of the most consistently used Pokémon in competitive play across multiple generations, with its electric chuck water typing, providing only one weakness to grass-type moves while granting it resistances to steel, fire, water, ice, and flying. And this defensive profile, combined with access to Will-O-Wisp for crippling physical attackers, Volt Switch for maintaining momentum, and Hydro Pump for offensive pressure, made it an ideal pivot that could switch into common threats, disrupt opponents, and maintain offensive presence throughout long matches. The transition from standard Rotom's pure electric talk ghost typing to the specialized forms creates distinct strategic identities for each variation, turning what could have been a single forgettable electric type into 5 separate Pokémon with different roles, strengths, and team synergies that remain relevant in competitive play more than a decade after their introduction. Bronzong stands as one of Sinnoh's most defensively oriented Pokémon, sporting a steel psychic typing that grants it 9 resistances and 2 immunities, while leaving it weak only to fire, ground, ghost, and dark type attacks. And when combined with its perfectly balanced defensive stats of 116 in both defense and special defense, plus access to Levitate as a standard ability, Bronzong can switch into a remarkable variety of threats, including dragon types, flying types, and psychic types that struggle to deal meaningful damage through its resistances. The design inspiration for Bronzong and its pre-evolution Bronzor comes from Japanese Dotaku, ancient ceremonial bells from the Yayoi period that were buried as ritual objects. And Game Freak translated this historical artifact into a floating bronze bell Pokémon, with arms that hang like clappers and a meditative presence that reflects the spiritual significance these bells held in ancient Japanese culture, connecting Bronzong to archaeological history in a way that few other Pokémon designs attempt. Drifloon presents one of the darkest Pokédex entries in the entire franchise, describing how it grabs onto children's hands and attempts to drag them away, with some entries explicitly stating that Drifloons spirit away, children who mistake them for balloons, and while the games never show this happening on screen, the implication that this cute purple balloon Pokémon is actually a predator of human children adds sinister undertones to its innocent appearance, and makes it one of the most unsettling ghost types despite its cheerful design. Drifblim Drifloon's evolution gained competitive attention in later generations through its Unburden ability, which doubles its speed stat after consuming or losing its held item, and when combined with the move Minimize, which raises evasion by 2 stages and makes Drifblim increasingly difficult to hit as the battle progresses. It created one of the most frustrating setup strategies in the game, where Drifblim could become both impossibly fast and nearly unhittable, forcing opponents to rely on never-miss moves or status conditions to stop its sweep. Hippowdon serves as Generation 4's premier Sandstream user, an ability that automatically summons a sandstorm upon entering battle, and maintains it for the entire duration of Hippowdon's time on the field, effectively giving it permanent weather control that chips away at non-rock, ground, and steel-type opponents, while boosting the special defense of rock types and enabling Sand Rush and Sand Force abilities on its teammates. What makes Hippowdon especially interesting from a design perspective is its dramatic gender differences, with male Hippowdon sporting a solid brown coloration, while female Hippowdon displays a darker, almost black body color. One of the most pronounced visual distinctions between male and female forms in the entire Pokemon franchise, and a detail that reflects real-world sexual dimorphism in hippopotamus species, where males and females can appear quite different in size and coloring. Vespiquen represents one of Generation 4's most unique evolution requirements, as only female Combi can evolve into Vespiquen upon reaching level 21. While male Combi remain in their 3-segment B form permanently with no evolutionary progression, a gender restriction that makes hunting for a female Combi with good stats more time-consuming than most other Pokemon, and adds rarity to what would otherwise be a common early-game bug type. The signature moves that define Vespiquen's identity, Attack Order, Defend Order, and Heal Order, cannot be learned by any other Pokemon, and represent the Queen Bee commanding her colony, with Attack Order summoning worker bees to strike the opponent with high critical hit ratio, Defend Order raising Vespiquen's defensive stats by 1 stage each, and Heal Order restoring 50% of Vespiquen's maximum HP, creating a self-sufficient Pokemon that can heal itself, boost its bulk, and attack with decent power, all through exclusive moves that reinforce its role as a colony commander rather than an individual fighter. Carnivine takes inspiration from Venus flytraps and pitcher plants, carnivorous plant species that trap and digest insects, and translates this into a pure grass-type design with a large mouthful of sharp teeth, vine-like tendrils that resemble arms, and a cheerful expression that contrasts with its predatory nature. Though its pure grass typing and mediocre stats of 74 HP, 100 attack, and 72 speed left it struggling to find a competitive niche in a generation filled with stronger grass types like Roserade and Torterra. Lumineon occupies the unfortunate position of being one of the most forgotten Pokemon in Sinnoh's roster. A water-type fish with a beautiful bioluminescent butterfly-like fin design that should make it memorable, but somehow fails to leave any lasting impression on players. And this obscurity stems partially from its availability only through fishing with a super rod in limited locations, its lack of competitive viability with middling stats across the board, and its absence from significant trainer battles, merchandise, or anime appearances that would give it cultural presence beyond its Pokédex entry. Chateau introduced one of the most innovative and ultimately problematic mechanics in Pokemon history through its signature move chatter, which allowed players to record a sound through their Nintendo DS microphone and have Chatot play that recording during battle, with the move's confusion chants supposedly tied to the volume and pitch of the recorded sound, though this feature was later removed in online battles because players exploited it by recording profanity, screams, or other inappropriate sounds that would play during competitive matches and create an unpleasant experience for opponents. The shiny forms of all Rotom variants maintain consistent coloring across the different appliances, shifting from the standard orange-red color scheme to a bright cyan-blue palette that applies uniformly, whether Rotom is in its base form, possessing a washing machine, a lawnmower, or any other appliance, creating visual consistency across the forms that makes shiny Rotom instantly recognizable, regardless of which variation a player encounters, and ensuring that the shiny status remains obvious, even when Rotom changes between its different typed configurations. Dialga stands as the embodiment of time itself within Pokemon mythology, a legendary dragon with the power to control temporal flow, speed up or slow down the passage of time. And according to Sinnoh legends, Dialga's heartbeat is what creates the flow of time throughout the universe, making it not just a powerful Pokemon, but a fundamental force that governs one of reality's core dimensions. The signature move that defines Dialga's combat identity is Roar of Time, a devastating dragon-type attack with 150 base power that ranks among the strongest moves any Pokemon can learn, though it requires Dialga to recharge on the following turn, leaving it vulnerable to revenge kills or set-up opportunities for opponents. And this risk-reward design makes Roar of Time a finishing move, rather than something Dialga can spam repeatedly throughout a battle. Dialga's Steel Dragon typing creates one of the most defensively sound type combinations in the entire game, granting it resistances to 10 different types, including Grass, Electric, Flying, Psychic, Bug, Rock, Water, and Normal, while leaving it weak only to Ground and Fighting type moves, a defensive profile that makes Dialga incredibly difficult to revenge kill or wear down through neutral attacks, and allows it to switch into many common offensive threats without taking significant damage. The Adamant Orb, Dialga's signature held item introduced in Generation 4, boosts both Steel and Dragon-type moves by 20% when held, effectively increasing the power of its stab attacks and making Dialga's Dragon-type moves like Draco Meteor and Steel-type moves like Flash Cannon even more threatening. And this item became essential for competitive Dialga sets that wanted to maximize its immediate offensive pressure, while maintaining coverage options against different defensive cores. Palkia represents space and spatial manipulation within Pokemon mythology, possessing the ability to bend dimensions, warp space to create shortcuts between distant locations, and tear holes in reality according to Pokédex entries that describe its power as rivaling Dialga's control over time. And together, these two legendaries form the fundamental forces that shape the physical universe within the Pokemon world. Spatial Rend serves as Palkia's signature move, a dragon-type attack with 100 base power and a special property that gives it a higher critical hit ratio than most moves, approximately a 12.5% chance, rather than the standard 6.25%, making it more likely to break through defensive boosts and deal unexpected burst damage that can swing close battles. And this critical hit potential, combined with Palkia's strong base 150 special attack, makes Spatial Rend one of the most threatening dragon-type moves in competitive play when it connects with a critical strike. The Water Dragon typing that Palkia possesses remains unique to this legendary across all generations, introduced so far, creating a type combination that provides excellent offensive coverage with only two weaknesses to dragon and fairy type moves, while granting Palkia access to powerful water type stab options like Hydro Pump and Surf alongside its dragon type arsenal. And this typing allows Palkia to threaten fire, ground, and rock types that would resist pure dragon-type attacks while maintaining neutral coverage against most of the metagame. The Lustrous Orb functions as Palkia's signature held item, mirroring the Adamant Orb's effect by boosting both water and dragon-type moves by 20%. And this power increase transforms Palkia's Hydro Pump into a devastating attack that can Oichko even bulky water-resistant Pokemon when boosted by the Orb, Rain, and Palkia's naturally high special attack stat, making it one of the most powerful water-type attackers in the game when properly supported. Giratina represents antimatter and distortion within the creation mythology, described as being banished to the distortion world for its violence in ancient times, a parallel dimension where the laws of physics operate differently, gravity shifts unpredictably, and the landscape defies conventional geometry with floating platforms, inverted waterfalls, and pathways that twist in impossible directions. In Pokemon Platinum, players gain access to the Distortion World as a playable area during the climax of the story, and when Giratina is encountered or battles in this realm, it appears in its origin form, a serpentine configuration with 6 ghostly tendrils extending from its body, and a more aggressive, streamlined appearance compared to its bulkier, altered form that appears in the regular world. And this form change represents Giratina's true nature when freed from the constraints of normal reality. Shadow Force stands as Giratina's signature move, a 2-turn ghost-type attack where Giratina vanishes on the first turn and strikes on the second with 120 base power. And uniquely among 2-turn moves, Shadow Force can bypass protection moves like Protect and Detect, making it valuable for breaking through stall tactics and forcing opponents to make difficult predictions about when Giratina will reappear. Though the 2-turn nature leaves Giratina vulnerable to switches and setup if the opponent predicts correctly. The ability differences between Giratina's forms create distinct strategic identities, with Altered Form possessing Levitate to grant ground immunity and maintain its defensive presence, while Origin Form trades Levitate for Pressure, an ability that forces opponents to expend 2 PP instead of 1 whenever they use a move, gradually draining their resources over long battles and making Giratina a potent stall option that can outlast opponents through PP depletion combined with its excellent bulk of 150 HP and strong defensive stats. The Creation Trio shares a base stat total of 680 across all 3 members, the standard benchmark for box legendary Pokemon that distinguishes them from lesser legendaries like the Lake Guardians, while keeping them below the 720 total reserved for event-exclusive mythicals like Arceus. And this consistency in power level reflects their equal importance in Sinnoh's creation mythology as the 3 beings who govern fundamental aspects of reality under Arceus's direction. The shiny forms of Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina each feature distinct color variations that make them highly sought after by collectors, with shiny Dialga shifting from its standard blue-grey metallic appearance to a pale teal-green coloration. Shiny Palkia transforming from pink-purple to a darker magenta-red palette, and shiny Giratina changing from black and red-gold to a silver-grey and blue-teal combination that applies to both its altered and origin forms, creating visually striking alternatives that maintain the legendary's imposing presence while offering collectors rare color variants. According to Sinnoh mythology, presented through in-game texts, ancient tablets, and NPC dialogue, Arceus created Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina from itself at the beginning of the universe, with Dialga and Palkia emerging to govern time and space respectively, while Giratina was banished for its destructive tendencies, establishing a divine hierarchy where Arceus functions as the creator deity, and these three dragons serve as the fundamental forces that maintain reality structure, a creation myth that parallels various real-world religious and philosophical concepts about the origins of time, space, and matter. The creation trio plays a central role in Team Galactic's plot throughout Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, with Cyrus attempting to capture and control either Dialga or Palkia to remake the universe according to his vision of a world without spirit or emotion. And in Platinum, this plan expands to include summoning both Dialga and Palkia simultaneously, before Giratina intervenes and drags Cyrus into the distortion world, creating one of the most dramatic climactic sequences in any Pokemon game, where the player must navigate a reality-bending dimension to stop a villain who sought to become a god through controlling the forces of creation itself. The Lake Guardians represent one of Generation 4's most cohesive legendary trios, with Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, each embodying a fundamental aspect of consciousness, knowledge, emotion, and willpower, respectively. And according to Sinnoh mythology, these three beings emerged from the same egg as Dialga and Palkia, making them siblings to the time and space dragons, but with roles focused on the mental and spiritual dimensions of existence, rather than the physical structure of reality. Uxie serves as the guardian of knowledge, a small yellow pixie-like Pokemon that keeps its eyes permanently closed during battle, and in most interactions, a design choice that reflects the danger inherent in its gaze according to Pokédex entries, which explicitly warn that anyone who looks directly into Uxie's open eyes will instantly lose all their memories. A terrifying power that positions knowledge as something so potent and overwhelming that direct exposure to its source can erase a person's entire identity. This theme of knowledge as both gift and danger appears throughout Uxie's lore, with the Pokédex describing it as having taught humans how to solve problems and improve their lives through learning, suggesting that Uxie's role involves carefully dispensing wisdom to humanity, in measured amounts, rather than overwhelming them with total understanding that would destroy their sense of self. And this philosophical depth makes Uxie more interesting as a legendary than its modest combat stats would suggest. The visual design of Uxie, with its closed eyes, small stature, and two long tails, creates a sage-like appearance that reinforces its identity as an ancient being of wisdom who observes without being observed, maintaining its knowledge in isolation at the bottom of Lake Acuity, where few trainers venture and even fewer successfully capture it. Mesprit embodies emotion and feeling, described in Pokédex entries as the being that taught humans to feel sorrow and joy, essentially granting humanity the capacity for emotional experience and transforming them from purely logical creatures into beings capable of forming bonds, experiencing loss, and finding happiness in connection with others. A mythological role that positions Mesprit as responsible for everything that makes human relationships meaningful. Unlike Uxie, which remains stationary at its lake, Mesprit becomes a roaming Pokemon after the player's initial encounter at Lake Verity, fleeing across Sinnoh's routes and forcing players to track its movements through the Pokédex and carefully position themselves to intercept it, a mechanical representation of how emotions can be fleeting, difficult to pin down, and require patience and persistence to fully understand and capture. Azelf represents willpower and determination, the mental force that allows living beings to push through adversity, maintain their goals despite setbacks, and exert their agency on the world, rather than simply reacting to circumstances. And this thematic focus on strength of will translates into Azelf having the most offensive stat distribution of the three Lake Guardians, with 125 base attack and 125 base special attack, making it the only member of the trio with legitimate sweeping potential in competitive play. All three Lake Guardians share identical base stat totals of 580, the standard for lesser legendary Pokemon that distinguishes them from box legendaries like Dialga and Palkia, while keeping them above regular Pokemon. And they all possess the Levitate ability, which grants them immunity to ground-type moves and reflects their pixie-like flying nature, creating mechanical consistency across the trio that mirrors their thematic connection as three aspects of a unified consciousness that emerged together at the dawn of creation. Heatran holds the distinction of being the first Fire-Steel legendary Pokemon ever introduced, a typing combination that grants it a unique defensive profile with 4 resistances, including Bug, Steel, Fairy, and Ice, plus an immunity to Poison-type moves, though it suffers from a quadruple weakness to ground-type attacks that makes Earthquake a constant threat, requiring careful play around faster ground-type Pokemon like Garchomp and Landorus. What makes Heatran especially unusual for a legendary Pokemon is its ability to have gender, with wild Heatran encounters having a 50% chance of being male or female, a characteristic that separates it from most legendary Pokemon, which are typically genderless and unable to breed, though Heatran remains in the undiscovered egg group despite having gender and cannot produce offspring through any conventional means, suggesting that its gender is more about individual identity than reproductive function. Regigigas stands as Generation 4's most controversial legendary Pokemon due to its signature ability Slow Start, which halves Regigigas' attack and speed stats. For the first 5 turns it remains in battle, effectively crippling what would otherwise be an incredibly powerful normal-type legendary, with 160 base attack and 110 base speed, by rendering it almost useless for the majority of most competitive matches. According to Sinnoh mythology and Pokédex entries, Regigigas is credited with moving continents using ropes, shaping the modern geography of the Pokémon world through its incredible strength, and creating the 3 legendary golems, Regirock, Registeel, and Regise, that appeared in Generation 3, establishing it as an ancient titan whose power once reshaped the planet, but now remains limited by some unexplained force that prevents it from accessing its full strength immediately. A narrative explanation for the mechanical handicap that slow start represents. Cresselia embodies the moon and peaceful dreams within Generation 4's legendary roster, serving as a direct counterpart to Darkrai's nightmare-inducing abilities by possessing the power to dispel bad dreams and bring restful sleep to humans and Pokemon suffering from night terrors, a yin-yang dynamic that positions these two Pokemon as opposing forces of sleep that balance each other within Sinnoh's extended legendary pantheon. The Lunarwing, an item associated with Cresselia, plays a central role in Diamond and Pearl's post-game storyline, where a sailor's son falls into an unending nightmare caused by Darkrai, and players must obtain a Lunarwing from Cresselia to cure the boy's affliction, demonstrating the healing properties attributed to Cresselia's lunar energy and reinforcing its identity as a benevolent legendary that aids humans rather than threatening them like many other powerful Pokemon. The shiny form of Cresselia shifts from its standard pink and yellow coloration to a deeper blue-purple palette with hints of magenta, creating a color scheme that evokes night sky and midnight, rather than the soft pink dawn aesthetic of its regular form. And this visual transformation makes shiny Cresselia one of the more striking legendary variants, while maintaining its crescent moon design motif. The Lake Guardians play a crucial role in Team Galactic's plot throughout Diamond and Pearl, with Cyrus capturing all three and using them to forge the Red Chain, a mystical artifact capable of controlling Dialga or Palkia, and this kidnapping forces players to infiltrate Team Galactic's headquarters, confront Cyrus at Mount Coronet, and witness the Creation Trio's awakening, establishing the Lake Guardians not just as post-game legendary encounters, but as central figures whose imprisonment drives the main story's climactic confrontation and connects the player's journey to Sinnoh's ancient mythology about the beings who granted humanity knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Arceus occupies a unique position within Pokemon mythology as the creator deity, described across Pokédex entries, in-game lore tablets, and Sinnoh legends as the Pokemon that emerged from a void before the universe existed and shaped all of reality from nothing, making it not just a powerful legendary, but the theological origin point for every region, Pokemon, and phenomenon that exists within the franchise's cosmology. The signature ability that defines Arceus's identity is multi-type, which allows it to change its type based on which of the 18 elemental plates it holds, transforming from a normal type into fire, water, electric, grass, or any other type, depending on the equipped plate. And this type-shifting mechanic positions Arceus as a being that transcends normal categorization and can embody any element it chooses, reflecting its status as the source from which all types ultimately derive. Arceus possesses a base stat total of 720, distributed evenly at 120 across HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed, a total that stood as the highest in the game until Generation 6 introduced Mega Evolutions that could surpass it. And this perfect statistical distribution with no weaknesses or specializations reinforces Arceus's identity as a balanced, complete being that excels in every area rather than focusing on specific combat roles. According to the creation mythology established through Sinnoh's ancient texts and Pokédex entries, Arceus created Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina from itself at the moment of the universe's birth, then created Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf to grant consciousness and mental capacity to the living beings that would inhabit the world, establishing a divine hierarchy where Arceus functions as the ultimate source and all other legendary Pokemon serve as aspects or servants of its will, though the games deliberately leave ambiguity about whether these myths represent literal truth or cultural explanations for natural phenomena that humans and Pokemon don't fully understand. Darkrai embodies nightmares and terrifying dreams within Generation 4's mythical roster, possessing the Bad Dreams ability which causes sleeping opponents to lose 1/8 of their maximum HP at the end of each turn, effectively turning sleep from a temporary status condition into a gradually fatal affliction that forces opponents to wake up or face elimination. And this ability transforms Darkrai into one of the most threatening sleep-inducing Pokemon in competitive history when combined with its signature move. Dark Void serves as Darkrai's exclusive move, a Dark-type status move that puts all opposing Pokemon to sleep with 80% accuracy in its original Generation 4 incarnation, though later generations reduced this accuracy to 50% to balance Darkrai's overwhelming strength in doubles formats, where it could incapacitate entire teams with a single move, and even with reduced accuracy Dark Void remains one of the most powerful status moves ever introduced due to its ability to affect multiple targets simultaneously. Darkrai's distribution as an event-only Pokemon made it extremely rare during Generation 4, requiring players to attend real-world events, download it through Mystery Gift during limited time windows, or use event items like the Member Card to access New Moon Island where Darkrai resides, and this exclusivity, combined with its competitive power, made Darkrai one of the most sought-after mythical Pokemon in the franchise, with legitimate event Darkrai commanding significant trading value within the community. The relationship between Darkrai and Cresselia as opposing forces of nightmare and peaceful sleep creates one of Generation 4's most compelling legendary dynamics, with both Pokemon sharing similar base stat totals of 600, mirrored offensive and defensive capabilities, and complementary roles in Sinnoh's mythology as beings that govern the Dream Realm from opposing philosophical positions, one inflicting terror and the other providing comfort. Though unlike Darkrai, which remains pure Dark-type, Cresselia's Psychic typing gives it different competitive applications and team synergies. Shaymin exists in two distinct forms that showcase one of Generation 4's most dramatic transformation mechanics, with Landform appearing as a small hedgehog-like creature covered in flowers, and Skyform transforming it into a sleek, reindeer-inspired Pokemon with a graceful flying stance. And this transformation occurs when Shaymin is exposed to a Grassidea flower during daytime hours while not frozen, allowing players to toggle between forms based on circumstance and strategic needs. Skyformer Shaymin gains the flying type alongside its grass typing, and switches from the Natural Cure ability to Serene Grace, an ability that doubles the chance of secondary effects occurring and synergizes perfectly with Air Slash to create a para-flinch strategy similar to Togekiss, where Shaymin can flinch opponents 60% of the time while outspeeding most threats with its 127 base speed, making Skyform a legitimate offensive threat in competitive play despite being a mythical Pokemon typically banned to special tiers. Seed Flare stands as Shaymin's signature move, regardless of form, a 120 base power grass-type special attack that has a 40% chance to lower the target's special defense by 2 stages, and when this secondary effect triggers, it can transform Shaymin from a moderate threat into a devastating sweeper capable of breaking through even specially defensive walls with subsequent attacks, though the move's 90% accuracy introduces risk into this strategy. Manaphy holds the distinction of being the only mythical Pokemon obtainable through a main series Pokemon game, specifically through the Pokemon Ranger title, where completing certain missions unlocked a special egg that could be transferred to Diamond or Pearl. And this distribution method made Manaphy slightly more accessible than purely event-based mythicals, like Darkrai and Arceus, while maintaining its status as a rare, special Pokemon that required effort beyond simply playing the main games. Tail Glow serves as Manaphy's most defining move, a Bug-type status move that raises the user's special attack stat by 3 stages, a boost so dramatic that it transforms Manaphy from a moderately powerful water type into an overwhelming special sweeper capable of punching through even resistant targets with boosted surfs and ice beams. And when combined with Manaphy's ability to learn a wide variety of special attacks, including Psychic, Energy Ball, and Signal Beam, Tail Glow turns it into one of the most dangerous setup sweepers in formats where mythical Pokemon are permitted. Phione represents one of the strangest evolutionary paradoxes in Pokemon history, as it can be obtained by breeding Manaphy, with Ditto in the daycare, producing an egg that hatches into Phione rather than another Manaphy. But Phione cannot evolve into Manaphy through any known method, creating a one-way breeding relationship where the parent and offspring belong to different species with no evolutionary connection, a unique situation that raises questions about whether Phione should be considered a true mythical Pokemon or simply a rare offspring variant. The shiny form of Arceus proved extremely difficult to obtain legitimately throughout most of Generation 4 and beyond, as the few events that distributed Arceus typically made it shiny locked, preventing players from soft resetting for alternate colorations. And while some Japanese events did distribute shiny Arceus during limited windows, the combination of regional exclusivity, short distribution periods, and lack of legitimate methods to hunt for shiny Arceus made it one of the rarest Pokemon variants in existence, with any shiny Arceus traded online likely being hacked or cloned from the few legitimate event distributions. All of Generation 4's mythical Pokemon required event distributions in the original Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum versions, with no in-game methods to obtain Darkrai, Shaymin, Arceus, Manaphy, or Phione, without either attending real-world events, downloading mystery gift distributions during specific time windows, or using event items like the member card, Oak's Letter, and Azure Flute to access special areas where these Pokemon could be encountered. And this exclusivity created a collector culture around mythical Pokemon where players traded heavily, attended conventions and store events, and carefully managed their event distributions to build complete living Pokédexes. The distribution methods for mythical Pokemon evolved significantly across Generation 4's lifespan, with early events requiring physical attendance at stores like GameStop or Toys R Us, where staff would wirelessly distribute the Pokemon to nearby DS systems. Later events utilizing Wi-Fi-based mystery gift that allowed players to download mythical Pokemon from home during limited periods. And some distributions, like Manaphy, requiring ownership of spin-off games, creating varied accessibility that made some mythicals easier to obtain than others, and established collection hierarchies, where Arceus remained the ultimate prize due to its divine status, powerful mechanics, and extremely limited legitimate distribution, even compared to other event exclusives. Rampardos possesses the highest base attack stat of any non-legendary rock-type Pokemon in the entire franchise at 165, a number that rivals and exceeds many legendary Pokemon, and positions it as one of the most physically powerful creatures ever introduced, though this incredible offensive strength comes at the cost of extremely poor defenses, with only 60 base defense and 50 base special defense that leave it vulnerable to nearly any attack that connects before it can strike. The design inspiration for Cranidos and Rampardos comes from Pachycephalosaurus, the dome-headed dinosaur famous for its thick skull that it potentially used for headbutting rivals or predators. And Game Freak translated this into a Pokemon whose entire identity revolves around smashing through obstacles with devastating head smash attacks that deal massive recoil damage but can obliterate opponents in a single hit, when backed by Rampardos' monstrous attack stat and stab bonus. Bastiodon serves as Rampardos' defensive counterpart in the fossil duo, sporting a base defense stat of 168 that makes it the bulkiest non-legendary rock type from a physical defensive standpoint. Though like Rampardos, it suffers from extreme stat allocation that leaves its special defense at only 65 and makes it vulnerable to special attacks despite its incredible ability to tank physical hits. Shieldon and Bastiodon draw inspiration from ceratopsian dinosaurs like Triceratops and Protoceratops, herbivorous dinosaurs characterized by their protective frills and facial horns. And this defensive theme translates into Bastiodon's shield-like face design with a steel plating that resembles castle fortifications, creating a Pokemon that embodies defensive warfare and immovable objects, rather than Rampardos' overwhelming offensive force. Though both fossils struggle in competitive play due to their extreme stat distributions and numerous weaknesses to common attacking types like fighting, ground, and water. Burmy introduces one of Generation 4's most unusual mechanics through its cloak system, which changes based on the location of Burmy's last battle, with Plant Cloak appearing after battles in grassy areas, Sandy Cloak forming after battles in caves or beaches, and Trash Cloak developing after battles in buildings. And these environmental adaptations reflect how bagworm larvae in nature construct protective cases from materials in their immediate surroundings. Wormadam, the female evolution of Burmy, maintains its cloak permanently upon evolution, and gains a secondary typing based on which form it evolved from, with Plant Cloak Wormadam becoming Bug Grass, Sandy Cloak gaining ground typing, and Trash Cloak adding steel, creating 3 distinct variants with different resistances, weaknesses, and strategic applications, despite sharing the same base stats and bug type identity. Mothim, the male evolution of Burmy, abandons the cloak system entirely upon evolution and becomes a pure bug flying type, regardless of which cloak form its pre-evolution possessed, though it gains significantly better offensive stats than Wormadam, with higher speed and special attack that allow it to function as a sweeper, rather than the defensive roles that Wormadam's forms typically fill. Combi requires a female specimen to evolve into Vespiquen upon reaching level 21, while male combi remain permanently stuck in their three-segment form with no evolutionary progression. A gender restriction that made hunting for female combi, with competitive stats frustrating for players who wanted to use Vespiquen on their teams, especially since female combi appear at only a 12.5% rate in wild encounters. Glameow and Purugly serve as Pearl version exclusives that mirror Diamond's Stunky and Skuntank, giving each version its own early game normal type cat Pokemon line. Though Glameow's elegant design contrasts sharply with Purugly's bulky, almost obese appearance, creating one of the most dramatic aesthetic shifts between an evolutionary pair, where the pre-evolution appears graceful and the evolution appears heavy and ungainly. Though this design choice reflects real cats that become less active and gain weight as they age. Chingling represents another baby, Pokemon added to an existing evolutionary line in Generation 4, requiring high friendship and evolution during nighttime hours to transform into Chimecho, a dual requirement that mirrors Budu's daytime friendship evolution and creates thematic consistency, where bell-shaped Pokemon associated with sound and meditation evolve during specific times of day. Stunky and Skuntank form Diamond's version-exclusive counterpart to Pearl's Glameow line, sporting a Poison Dark typing that gives them a unique defensive profile with resistances to Poison, Dark, Grass, and Ghost, plus an immunity to Psychic-type moves and their signature ability. Aftermath causes opponents who knock them out with contact moves to lose 25% of their maximum HP, creating a revenge-killing punishment mechanic that discourages physical attackers from finishing off low-health Stunky or Skuntank. The baby Pokemon Bonsly, Mime Jr., and Happiny each require specific conditions to evolve into their adult forms, with Bonsly needing to know Mimic upon leveling up to become Sudowoodo, Mime Jr. requiring Mimic as well to evolve into Mr. Mime, and Happiny needing to hold an oval stone and level up during daytime to become Chansey. Convoluted requirements that add complexity to what would otherwise be simple, level-based evolutions and force players to engage with move tutors or breeding mechanics to obtain these evolutions. Munchlax holds the distinction of being one of the rarest wild Pokemon encounters in Diamond and Pearl due to the honey tree mechanic, where players could slather honey on special trees scattered throughout Sinnoh and return 6 hours later to potentially find a wild Pokemon. But Munchlax appeared at only a 1% rate on specific trees that varied between save files, creating a hunt so frustrating and time-consuming that many players traded for Munchlax, rather than attempting to encounter it through legitimate means, though obtaining Munchlax was necessary for players seeking a complete Sinnoh Pokédex and access to its evolution Snorlax. Skorupi and Drapion embody the Poison Scorpion archetype with their purple and black coloration, segmented bodies, large claws, and tail stingers, though interestingly they possess Poison Dark typing rather than Poison Bug, which would seem more intuitive, given their arthropod inspiration, a typing choice that grants them immunity to psychic-type moves and positions them as predatory threats, rather than simple bug types. Though this decision leaves the bug type underrepresented in Sinnoh's roster, and contributes to Generation 4 having relatively few new bug-type Pokemon compared to other generations. Croagunk and Toxicroak draw inspiration from poison dart frogs, the brightly coloured amphibians from Central and South America whose skin secretes toxic compounds as a defense mechanism, And Game Freak translated this into a fighting poison type with distinctive orange, blue, and black coloration that warns potential predators of its toxicity, while giving it access to strong fighting type moves like Drain Punch and poison type options like Gunk Shot that provide excellent coverage against fairy, grass, and psychic types. Abermaznau, evolving from Snova at level 40, introduces the Snow Warning ability to Sinnoh's roster, automatically summoning a hailstorm upon entering battle that chips away at non-ice type opponents while boosting the power of Blizzard to perfect accuracy. And this weather control, combined with Abomasnow's grass, ice typing, creates a defensive niche where it can check water, ground, and electric types while supporting ice-type teammates, though its 7 weaknesses, including quadruple weakness to fire-type moves, make it one of the most vulnerable, fully evolved Pokemon in terms of type matchups despite its solid bulk and offensive presence. And as you drift off tonight, surrounded by the quiet stories of Sinnoh's forests, mountains, and lakes, remember that every region holds creatures both familiar and strange, that evolution takes countless forms across time and space, and that sometimes the most memorable journeys are the ones where we discover not just legendary dragons and mythical deities, but the small, forgotten Pokemon who live in the shadows of greatness, carrying their own histories, dreams, and purposes. Rest well, and may your dreams be filled with the gentle snowfall of Route 217, the warm glow of Sunyshore City's solar panels, and the timeless peace of a region where time, space, and spirit converge.